In Peru, political parties call for early elections as newly appointed President Boluarte asks for a political truce in the nation. A shipment of Ebola vaccine candidates to be used in a clinical trial has arrived in Uganda. And Lebanon's parliament failed to elect the nation's president for the 9th time. Hello and welcome to teleSUR English. I am Estefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito in Ecuador. This is from the south. In Peru, political parties and movements are calling for elections or a constituent assembly to solve the political crisis that the nation is going through after the removal of former President Pedro Castillo. With the failure of the constitutionally elected government and the assumption of power, former Vice President Boluarte, the political parties warned that the constitutional order has been interrupted. The Peru Libre Party, which brought Castillo to power, described the parliamentary majority as racist and anti-democratic and is betting on consulting the bases in order to renew the authorities. And following the removal of Pedro Castillo as president of Peru and his arrest, part of the population took to the streets of Lima to protest against the decision of Congress. In addition to the days of protest in Lima, diverse social movements have also demonstrated in the cities of Ayacucho, Huancavelica, and Arequipa. Venezuelans mobilized this Thursday as part of the commemorative activities for the Day of Love and Loyalty, 10 years after the leader of the Bolivarian Revolution, Hugo Chavezs, gave his last speech after his illness was detected. Demonstrators grouped in diverse social and political organizations toured the city of Caracas to reach the mountain barracks where the remains of Comandante Chavez rests. Numerous leaders recalled the last speech where Chavez outlined 10 years ago the strategy to continue what he called the definitive independence.
None of us, never ever thought that such a situation could occur in a historical process as beautiful and with such an emotional and political impact as a revolutionary process in Venezuela, which is not only the historical revolutionary process of Venezuela, it is a worldwide, continental impact that the Bolivarian and socialist revolution of the 21st century, founded by our commander Chavez, has had on the peoples and leaders of the world.
Venezuelan president made a reference to the latest events in the Republic of Peru. He denounced that Pedro Castillo was a target of parliamentary, political, and judicial persecution.
From the first moment of the election, they do not want to recognize his triumph. They belittle his triumph. In the end, and forced by reality, they have to recognize his triumph as president. And once he is sworn in on July the 28th, 2021, the conspiracy for a parliamentary coup begins and the attack, the attrition begins. Votes of censure against the ministers, against the heads of the cabinet, a permanent harassment until they took him blow by blow, acting relentlessly in a parliamentary, political, and judicial persecution without limit. They absolutely cornered him.
Argentinian government has filed a formal complaint against judges Buenos Aires officials and Clarín Group businessmen who shared a trip to Lake Escondido. The Minister of Justice, Martín Soria, presented the case at the Federal Prosecutor's Office of Bariloche, where there was already an indictment for another case. 6 of these people are accused of non-compliance with the duties of a public official and corruption. In the complaint, the government also confiscated the cell phones of all those involved in a visit to a property of the British tycoon Joe Louis in Lake Escondido, Bariloche, last October. On Thursday, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel concluded his official Caribbean tour. President Díaz-Canel visited St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados, Dominica, and Grenada with the aim of promoting bilateral relations with Caribbean nations. The Cuban head of state discussed collaboration agreements in agriculture, health, infrastructure, education, environment, climate change, among others. He also headed his national delegation in the 8th CARICOM Cuba Summit. And with a growing cholera outbreak, increasing levels of food insecurity and violence spreading throughout Haiti, a top United Nations official asked for more support to assist the Caribbean country.
It continues to be a worry for the country and for us. Cases continue to rise, and you have now 283 people that have died from the illness, and we also have close to 12,000 people that have been hospitalized during this period. So this is since 2nd October. And we have also close to more than 14,000 now suspected cases of cholera throughout the country. And what we are seeing, in fact, is not only the continued increase of cholera cases, but also the spread to the regions. And there is now in 8 of the 10 departments, there are confirmed cholera cases, and this is a worrying trend for us and for the country.
We're taking our first break now. Join us again after this, and also don't forget to follow us on our TikTok account at teleSUR English for more. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. Young women diagnosed with breast cancer in the U.S. often delay pregnancy for years while they take hormone-blocking pills, but there's hope for them. A reassuring new study found they can take a 2-year break from these drugs to get pregnant without raising their short-term risk of cancer coming back. Results were discussed on Thursday at the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium. The study followed more than 500 women after surgery for early-stage cancer. All then spent at least 18 months taking hormone-blocking drugs. Hundreds of journalists and other employees at the New York Times began a 24-hour walkout on Thursday, the first strike of its kind at the newspaper in more than 40 years. Newsroom employees and other members of the News Union of New York said they are tired with bargaining that has dragged on since their last contract expired on March 2021. The union announced last week that more than 1,000 employees would stage a 24-hour work stoppage unless the two sides reach a contract deal. In Bolivia, the implementation of a drought immediate response plan has begun. This phenomenon affects 153 municipalities in 8 of the country's 9 departments. This rainfall shortage is expected to last until the first quarter of next year. From La Paz, our correspondent Freddy Morales with more.
The government has created a cabinet with 4 ministries of state responsible for executing the so-called drought immediate response plan.
There is going to be rainfall, but it will be scarce, and in many municipalities it will be quite scarce, which will cause a drought and will have an impact on production and also on food security. Comrades, in this sense, the president has formed a cabinet for this emergency, the cabinet to fight against the drought.
The emergency plan began in La Paz Altiplano with the distribution of water storage tanks pipes, and tanker trucks to the municipalities suffering from the lack of rainfall.
With the supply of water for human consumption, water for irrigation, water to recover the production, brothers and sisters of a Bolivian altiplano, and also water for animal consumption and for our livestock activities.
The plan calls for the drilling of wells and the construction of water cutoffs for harvesting and storage.
This crisis obviously has a background. Not only the consequences of an excessive deforestation, but also the global phenomenon that is part of a merciless capitalism that in the name of globalization, in the name of the use and abuse of our natural resources, is affecting the environment.
The emergency plan foresees an immediate investment of $4 million in the first month and almost $30 million up to the first quarter of the next year. According to the weather forecast, the lack of rainfall will last until March of next year. 153 municipalities in 8 of the 9 departments are under the state of emergency due to the damage caused by the drought.
Freddy Morales, teleSUR, Bolivia.
The government of Portugal decreed a state of alert in Lisbon, its capital city, since at least one person died due to heavy rains pouring over the country. The National Emergency Commander of Civil Protection, Andre Fernandes, urged the population to stay home until Thursday, date to which the state of alert is expected to be enforced. Fernandes also urged citizens living in low-lying areas to seek shelter in safer places. Civil Protection reported that the rains flooded streets, train stations, and hospitals. The Chinese government declared that President Xi Jinping's visit to Saudi Arabia is the highest level diplomatic event in the history of the Asian country and its relations with the Arab world. The Chinese president held talks with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman at Al Yamah's palace in Riyadh on Thursday afternoon local time on behalf of King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman extended a warm welcome to President Xi to express sincere congratulations on the success of the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China and on Xi's re-election as General Secretary of the Central Committee. China on Thursday denounced another planned sale of aircraft parts to Taiwan by U.S., urging it to stop creating new factors of tension.
China urges the U.S. to abide by the One China principle and the provisions of the 3 joint communiques, earnestly put into practice the commitment made by the U.S. leader not to support Taiwan independence, stop selling arms to Taiwan and U.S.-Taiwan military ties, stop creating new factors of tension in the Taiwan Strait, stop using Taiwan to contain China, and stop going further down the wrong and dangerous path.
We're taking our last break now. Join us again after this. And also don't forget to follow me on my Twitter account at Ibravo teleSUR for more. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Thursday, a shipment of Ebola vaccine candidates to be used in a clinical trial has arrived in Uganda. Health Minister Jane Ruth Asing and the WHO Uganda Incident Manager attended a ceremony to receive the doses. Even though the outbreak is seemingly waning with no new cases reportedly recently, Agan remains cautious. According to the WHO criteria, an Ebola outbreak ends when there are no new cases for 42 consecutive days. M23 rebels killed at least 131 civilians in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo in November 29th, according to preliminary findings. The UN mission in the country said. Authorities in Kinshasa has said that some 300 people, almost all civilians, had died in the M23 attacks in the village of Kishishe in the eastern North Kivu province. The group has denied it. It has blamed stray bullets for the deaths of just 8 civilians. The UN's MONUSCO mission said the victims were killed as part of their reprisals against the civilian population. A new report from the World Health Organization says the coronavirus pandemic disrupted efforts to control malaria, resulting in 63,000 additional deaths and 13 million more infections worldwide in 2 years. The report, released on Thursday, adds that cases of the disease increased in 2020 and continued to rise in 2021, although at a slower pace. New challenges include a new massive invasive mosquito species resistant to many pesticides, but the biggest hurdle remains funding. Africa remains the continent most affected by malaria, according to the UN, where 619,000 malaria deaths last year and an estimated 247 million infections. 99% of these occurred in Africa. For the 9th time, Lebanon's parliament failed to elect the nation's president. At the meeting held on Thursday, independent parliament member Michel Mawad received 39 votes. The same number of deputies submitted blank ballots. 4 ballots were annulled, and the rest of the deputies voted for other candidates. In Damascus, orphaned children recover their joy at a Christmas party organized for the holiday season by the Syrian charity Isaf Orphanage, which takes them and the cares for them after they lost their parents and families because of the terrorist war imposed on their country. Let's have a look.
It is a stop in the difficult daily life imposed by the rigors of war and the blockade to get into the Christmas spirit and the optimism necessary for these children, an activity that Isaf Orphanage is grateful for. It was achieved thanks to the cooperation of the Russian Cultural Center in Damascus, the Russian Center for Reconciliation in Syria, and the Chechen charity association Kadyrov.
This activity on the occasion of the Christmas season aims at bringing joy to the children of the orphanage, who we consider an essential part of society, and we achieve this thanks to the valuable material and spiritual contribution of the Russian Cultural Center and the Chechen Charity Association Kadyrov, that mark a special presence in most of the activities of this nature developed by different associations of the civil society of the country. In the midst of the difficult situation facing this friendly nation, we developed as a cultural center several and varied activities, including work with children to help them in different aspects, and we do it with the cooperation of the Syrian civil society associations. And this event today on the occasion of Christmas is part of this work.
Some 115 orphans depicted in the pictures I drew during the event, all the joy that motivated them to celebrate this holiday. Even when they cannot celebrate this with their families, they are full of enthusiasm and hope to be able to share with their teachers from the orphanage and their friends from Russia and the Chechen Republic.
A strong relationship of friendship binds our two countries that both suffer from the unjust sanctions that in the case of Russia might not have much effect, but undoubtedly negatively affect the Syrian society, and that is why we work together to overcome the repercussions of these sanctions and to restore security and achieve peace, and today's Christmas activity is an example of this. The drawings of these children show their joy for the Christmas gifts we have offered them today in an atmosphere of joy and positive energy. And this activity is part of the humanitarian work we have been carrying out in Syria for 6 years, including the delivery of humanitarian food and medical aid to IDPs, hospitals, and orphanages.
Christmas gifts did not delay. The organizers of the party argued that the children of Syria, despite the difficult situation they live in because of the war and blockade, have the right, like their peers in the rest of the world, to celebrate Christmas and dream of a better new year.
Hisham Wannous, teleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
And just as the hearts of millions of fans live the emotions of the Qatar 2022 World Cup, teleSUR joins the sporting event with From the Field, a show that brings news, analysis, reviews, and more to our audience. Don't miss it. Our show airs at 1 p.m. local time Caracas, 12 p.m. New York. Remember, From the Field only on teleSUR. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also be sure to follow us on our socials. We're on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.